Commander Zorak Neural of the Galactic Triumvirate massaged his 3 eye talks and stared at the holographic display. Another report of human expansion into the Orion Arm. Another potential conflict brewing. Another headache. Why can't they just stay in their little corner of the galaxy? He grumbled to his aide, Lieutenant Kale. They've been spacefaring for what? 80 years? And already they're pushing boundaries like toddlers testing their parents. Kale's skin rippled with amusement, their species equivalent of a chuckle. They breed like Krellian swarm rats, sir. Their population pressure alone was not what I asked for. Lieutenant Zorak snapped. I know the statistics. What I don't understand is the psychology. The curved door to his office hissed open, and Admiral Sarek swept in, her ceremonial cape billowing behind her. The scales along her neck were flushed bright orange, never a good sign. The Council has reached a decision, she announced. Without preamble. We are initiating formal peace talks with the humans. Zorak's middle eye talk drooped in disbelief. Peace talks? We aren't even at war with them yet. Preemptive diplomacy, Sarek replied, her tone dry as the deserts of Nyx Prime. Apparently, someone important noticed that every species that Seps tried to intimidate humans has regretted it spectacularly. The Korthos incident, Kale murmured. Sarek hissed in agreement. 3 warships, 3 against 1 human mining vessel, and somehow the Korthos battle group ended up as debris. The Council is concerned. So instead of showing strength, we are inviting them to tea, Zorak muttered. Marvelous strategy. You misunderstand, Commander. Admiral Sarek Estes' eyes narrowed to slits. You will be hosting these talks. On neutral ground, with full diplomatic powers to negotiate terms that keep them contained without triggering their bizarre propensity for turning defeat into victory. Zorak felt his heart sink to somewhere near his lower intestines. Me? But I said not a diplomat. I said a military strategist. Precisely. Sarek's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among her kind. We need someone who understands the threat they pose. Someone who won't be charmed by their tea. What did the cultural report call it? Ah yes, their endearing tenacity. Dearer. Endearing like a plasma burn, Zorak muttered. You leave in 6 cycles, the Admiral continued as if he hadn't spoken. The delegation from Earth will meet you at Outpost Kappa. It's uninhabited except for service droids, atmospherically compatible for both species, and, she paused meaningfully, equipped with defensive measures should negotiations become heated. After Sarek departed, Zorak turned to Kale. Pull everything we have on human diplomatic protocols. And I mean everything. If they consider belching a sign of respect, I want to know about it. Already compiling, sir, Kale replied, their digits flying over the control panel. Though I should warn you, their diplomatic corps is notoriously unpredictable. Wonderful, Kale. Just what we need. 6 cycles later, Zorak stood in Outpost Kappa's cavernous meeting chamber, tugging at his formal uniform collar. The room was designed to impress. Soaring ceilings, ornate pillars carved from rare blue asteroid minerals, and a massive circular table that had hosted peace treaties ending 3 interstellar conflicts. Status report, he barked into his communicator. Human vessel has docked, Commander, came the response. Their delegation is smaller than expected. Just 3 representatives. Zorak frowned. 3? The protocol suggested at least 12 for a negotiation of this magnitude. Perhaps they don't consider it as significant as we do, suggested Kale, who stood at attention nearby. Or they so arrogant. They think 3 is sufficient, Zorak replied. Either way, it sets insulting. The massive doors at the far end of the chamber slid open with a theatrical rumble. Zorak straightened his posture, preparing to project authority and gravitas. The Triumvirate delegation himself, Kale, and 10 senior officials formed a perfectly symmetrical receiving line. 3 humans entered. Zorak had studied human physiology, of course, but seeing them in person was different. They walked with a strange rolling gait on their 2 legs, seeming perpetually off balance, yet never quite falling. Their faces were flat, with ridiculous little sensory organs protruding in all the wrong places, and they were colorful, each dressed in different hues rather than the uniform formality the occasion demanded. The one in the lead was small for their species, with a head covering of red fibers, hair human records called it. Behind her walked a taller specimen with dark skin and no visible hair. And finally, a pale one with yellow hair and an expression that reminded Zorak uncomfortably of a predator assessing prey. "Commander Zorak," Norel, the red-haired one said, in surprisingly good galactic standard, "I am Ambassador Tara Wilson, of Earth. My colleagues are Dr. Jordan Bell, xenobiologist, and Major Annika Porter, military attaché." Zorak performed the formal greeting gesture of the triumvirate. 3 tentacles extended, palms upward. "The Galactic Triumvirate welcomes you to Outpost Kappa," he recited. "May our discussions bring harmony to the void between our worlds." Wilson smiled, displaying rows of small white bones that humans used for crushing food. Zorak suppressed a shudder. "Let's hope so," she said, ignoring the formal response her cultural briefing surely contained. "Though I have to say, we were surprised to receive your invitation. We weren't set to where there was any diplomatic situation requiring, what was your phrase, urgent resolution. Already deviating from protocol. Typical. Your species' 70's expansion into the Orion Arm has created concerns among triumvirate worlds," Zorak stated flatly. "We seek to establish boundaries that will prevent future conflicts." The one called Porter, the predator-eyed one, made a sound that human records identified as a snort. "Boundaries," she said. "The nearest triumvirate colony is 17 light-years from our farthest outpost. The rate of your expansion suggests that gap will close rapidly," Kale interjected. Wilson held up a small pink hand. "Perhaps we should all sit down before we get into the details. We said traveled quite far, and these discussions clearly require careful consideration." Zorak gestured toward the grand table. "Of course." As they took their seats, the humans clustering together on one side rather than distributing themselves as protocol dictated, Zorak noticed something odd. The humans had brought no visible recording devices, no data pads, not even the primitive paper their briefings mentioned, they sometimes still used. "You have come unprepared?" he asked, unable to contain his surprise. Dr. Bell smiled. "Oh, we 7 prepared. Just not in the way you might expect." Something about the way he said it sent a chill down Zorak's central nerve column. The formal proceedings began with a recitation of the triumvirate's concerns, human population growth rates, resource consumption patterns, military capabilities that seemed disproportionate to their technological level, and most importantly, their alarming tendency to win conflicts they should, by all logical analysis, lose. Throughout the presentation, Ambassador Wilson listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Her colleagues remained silent, though Porter's eyes never stopped moving, clearly assessing the room's defensive capabilities. When the triumvirate presentation concluded, Wilson folded her hands neatly on the table. "If I understand correctly," she said, "you are concerned that humans might eventually pose a threat to triumvirate interests, despite the fact that we've had exactly 0 conflicts with your people, have never encroached on your territory, and have, in fact, established trade relationships with 3 of your protectorate worlds." "Preemptive measures," began one of the triumvirate officials. "Or generally taken against known threats," Wilson interrupted. "Not against potential allies who happen to be good at surviving." Zorak leaned forward. The Korthos incident was a response to pirates attempting to seize a civilian mining vessel. The Korthos fired first. Porter cut in, her voice sharp. "We have the recordings," added Bell, "which we have shared with your intelligence services. Though I noticed they don't appear in your presentation." Zorka felt his skin flush with heat. That information had indeed been absent from his briefing materials. Someone had edited the reports. But why? Regardless, he pressed on. "The Triumvirate Council proposes a treaty establishing clear zones of influence. Human expansion would be limited to these designated sectors." He gestured, and a holographic map appeared above the table, showing a tiny bubble of space labeled human territory, surrounded by the vast expanse of triumvirate-controlled systems. There was a moment of silence. Then Ambassador Wilson laughed. Not a polite diplomatic chuckle, but a full, genuine laugh that echoed off the ornate ceiling. "Oh, sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "But you can possibly be serious. I assure you, Ambassador. The Triumvirate Council is quite serious." Wilson shook her head. "You said you're asking us to sign away our future, to voluntarily confine ourselves to a tiny fraction of available space, surrounded by your territory on all sides. That's not a peace treaty. That's a reservation. It's generous, considering your species' limited history in space," another triumvirate official said stiffly. "Is it?" Dr. Bell asked softly. "Or is it that you noticed something about us that frightens you?" The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "We are not frightened," Zorik declared. "We are cautious. Your species has demonstrated unusual capabilities." "Such as?" Porter asked, speaking directly for the first time. "Your adaptability is concerning," Cal said. "You thrive in environments that should be hostile. You develop solutions to problems that seem insurmountable. You win conflicts against superior forces through unpredictable means. So we thirst being penalized for being good at survival." Wilson raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting diplomatic position." Zorik felt the conversation slipping away from him. This wasn't proceeding according to the prepared scenarios. "The terms are non-negotiable," he stated, falling back on his instructions. "The Triumvirate Council has authorized me to offer economic incentives in exchange for your compliance. But the territorial boundaries are fixed." Wilson exchanged glances with her colleagues. Something unspoken passed between them. "I think," she said carefully, "that there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of these talks." "How so?" Zorik asked suddenly. The moment she stood up, they became wary. "You have presented this as a negotiation between equals, yet your terms suggest otherwise." Ambassador Tara Wilson's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath it. "More importantly, you seem to have made assumptions about human behavior and motivations that are inaccurate. Our xenopsychologists have studied your species extensively," Lieutenant Kale objected. "Have they?" Dr. Bell smiled. "Or have they studied our responses to threats? Because there's a crucial difference." Major Porter leaned forward. "Let me be blunt, Commander. Your proposal reads like the opening move in a containment strategy, the kind that typically precedes military action if the contained party doesn't comply." Commander Zorak felt his heart accelerate. How had they deduced that? The contingency plans for enforcement were classified at the highest level. "That is not," he began. "It is," Wilson interrupted. "And we have seen this pattern before, with the Korthos, with the Imrazi Consortium. The difference is, we are giving you an opportunity to reconsider before things escalate." "Was that a threat, Ambassador?" Zorik asked coldly. Wilson smiled. "Not at all. It's an invitation to actual diplomacy, rather than whatever this is." He gestured at the holographic map still hovering above them. "The terms reflect the Council SEP's decision," Zorak insisted. "If you reject them—" "When we reject them," Porter corrected. Zorik SEP's patience snapped. "Then you leave us no choice but to enforce the security of our borders through other means." The three humans exchanged another glance. Then, to Zorak's surprise, Ambassador Wilson stood up. The peace talks ended when she stood up. Not dramatically, not storming out in anger, but calmly, with purpose. She straightened her colorful garment and looked directly at Zorak. "Commander Next-Rel," she said, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "I believe we need to restart this conversation with more accurate information. Specifically, information about why the Triumvirate is suddenly so interested in containing humanity." "I have explained our concerns," Zorak replied stiffly. "No," Wilson said. "You have presented a narrative, But Dr. Bell has been analyzing your presentation and certain details don't best align with our own intelligence. For instance, the population growth projections you cited are nearly double our actual rates. Bell nodded. And the military capabilities you attributed to us include technologies we don't possess. Yet, Porter added, her predator eyes fixed on Zorak, suggests someone has been feeding your council deliberately inflated threat assessments. The question is, who benefits from pushing our civilizations toward conflict? Zorak felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. Could she be right? The data discrepancies were troubling, especially coming from the highest levels. What are you suggesting? He asked cautiously. Wilson Sett's expression softened slightly. I'm suggesting that neither of us may have the complete picture. And before we commit to paths that lead to unnecessary conflict, we should compare notes. She gestured to her colleagues, who also rose to their feet. We will return to our vessel for the night cycle. Wilson continued. Tomorrow, we like to present our own assessment of the situation, including intelligence about third parties who might be interested in seeing the triumvirate and humanity at odds. Third parties? Kale echoed, confusion evident in their voice. The galaxy is full of players, Porter said grimly. Not all of them show their cards. As the humans turned to leave, Wilson paused and looked back at Zorak. One more thing, Commander. You mentioned our tendency to win conflicts we should lose. Have you considered that might be because we only fight when we must? When the alternative is extinction, humans become resourceful. With that parting thought, the human delegation departed, leaving Zorak staring at the space they had occupied, his mind racing with possibilities he had never considered. Sir, Case's voice broke through his thoughts. Should I report this to Admiral Serix? Zorak considered for a long moment. No, he said finally. Not yet. First, I want to verify some of our intelligence independently. Something isn't adding up. And I intend to find out what. As he gazed at the holographic maps still floating above the table, the tiny bubble labeled human territory surrounded by the vast triumvirate space, Zorak couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something vital. Something that might change everything he thought he knew about the peculiar bipeds from Earth. And for the first time since receiving this assignment, Commander Zorak felt something unexpected. Curiosity. The long cycle on Outpost Kappa brought no clarity to Commander Zorak. He'd spent the night analyzing data, comparing intelligence reports, and finding disturbing inconsistencies. The humans' accusations had merit. Someone had altered the threat assessments, subtly enough to pass cursory inspection, but the pattern was unmistakable once he knew to look. Anything from Admiral Serix? He asked Kale, who had remained by his side through the sleepless hours. Nothing, sir, but there is unusual communication traffic between her vessel and the Vortex sector. Zorak Sep's eye stalks stiffened. Vortex. There says nothing in Vortex except, the Sion corporate holdings. Kale confirmed. Specifically, their primary mining operations. Pieces began clicking into place in Zorak Sep's mind. The Seven Conglomerate, the largest resource extraction corporation in triumvirate space, had been lobbying for expanded mining rights for Cycle's rights. The council had denied due to environmental concerns, rights that would be instantly granted if there was a military necessity. Pull up the star charts for the proposed human containment zone, Zorak ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the tiny bubble allocated for human expansion. Now overlay known resource deposits. As the new data appeared, Kale gasped. The space surrounding the human containment zone glowed with indicators of rare minerals, heavy elements, and energy sources. They're not containing humans to prevent conflict, Zorak murmured. They're boxing them out of resource-rich regions for the benefit of Siphion, Kale added. But why manipulate intelligence reports? Why not simply declare those sectors off-limits for legitimate economic reasons? Zorak Sep's third eye narrowed. Because the Council would never approve such naked profiteering at the risk of interstellar war. But if humans could be painted as an existential threat, a chime sounded, indicating the human delegation had returned to the outpost. What now, sir? Kale asked. Zorak straightened his uniform. Now, we hear what the humans have to say, and then I make the hardest decision of my career. When the humans entered the chamber, Zorak noted immediately that something had changed. Wilson carried herself differently. More tension in her small frame, her eyes sharper, more focused. Porter walked with one hand resting near a device on her hip that Zorak strongly suspected was a weapon. Despite the strict no-arms policy of the outpost, Bell carried an actual physical case, something he hadn't brought yesterday. Commander Wilson nodded curtly. I trust you Sev had a productive night. Illuminating, Zorak replied. I believe you mentioned having intelligence to share. Wilson gestured to Bell, who placed the case on the table and opened it. Inside sat a simple data cube of unfamiliar design. This contains intercepted communications between Admiral Serix and representatives of the Seven Conglomerate, Wilson stated without preamble, dating back approximately one standard year and outlining a plan to manipulate triumvirate intelligence regarding human expansion. The chamber fell silent. Triumvirate officials exchanged nervous glances. That Sep's a serious accusation, Zorak said carefully. How did you obtain these communications? Porter smiled thinly. Let's just say humans have certain capabilities your intelligence services may have underestimated. The point, Wilson continued, is that we are not here to negotiate a containment treaty. We are here to address a conspiracy that threatens both our peoples. Zorak felt the weight of 11 pairs of triumvirate eyes upon him. His next words would determine much. Before we proceed, he said slowly, I should inform you that ISEV conducted my own investigation overnight. The data you Seb are presenting appears to align with my findings. A ripple of shock went through the triumvirate delegation. One official rose to his feet. Her commander, this is treasonous. You cannot possibly believe these primitives over Admiral Serix. Sit down, Counselor Vod. Zorak snapped. I believe evidence, not narratives. And the evidence suggests we have been manipulated. Wilson Tet's expression softened slightly. Then perhaps we can have a real conversation now. Bell activated the data cube, and a holographic display sprang to life above the table. It showed Admiral Serix in her private chambers, speaking with a Seven executive. The audio was crystal clear. Once the humans are contained, the Council will have no choice but to grant emergency resource extraction permits. The military will require unprecedented material support to maintain the containment barrier. And my commission? The Sevon asked. 20% of all new operations, as agreed. Serix replied. Plus positions for your offspring in the academy. Bell paused the playback. There are 17 more conversations like this, aggressively detailing how intelligence would be falsified, how the Council would be pressured, and how military resources would be allocated. Counselor Var had gone pale. This cannot be authentic. I assure you it is, Porter said. Your own verification protocols will confirm it. Zorak felt sick. He'd served the triumvirate with honor for his entire career, believing in its principles of order and collective security. To discover such corruption at the highest levels. Why bring this to me? He asked Wilson. You could have taken this directly to the Council. We tried, she replied grimly. 3 months ago, our diplomatic corps sent a detailed report through official channels. It vanished into the bureaucracy, and suddenly we were facing increased triumvirate military patrols near our borders. So you accepted this meeting as a way to bypass Serix, Zorak realized. Wilson nodded. We gambled that the officer chosen to lead the talks might be someone of integrity, someone who would listen. Kale leaned forward. But surely your government doesn't expect the triumvirate to simply ignore human expansion forever. Evidence of the Great Harvest. Threat. Even without Admiral Saren's corruption, your species' growth rate is concerning, which brings us to our proposal. Darnell said, the real reason we came. She nodded to Vela, who switched the holographic display to a new image. A complex star chart, with regions lit in various colors. We call this the Orion Cooperative Initiative, Darnell explained. Rather than containment, we propose managed co-development of the Orion Arm, with demilitarized buffer zones, joint scientific missions, and a resource-sharing compact. Commander Riven stepped forward. Human ships have already charted most of these sectors. We've identified resource deposits that could support both our civilizations for centuries, if we cooperate instead of compete. And we gain what, exactly? Asked another member of the Triarch Council skeptically. Our technology, Vela said simply. Specifically, our adaptive engineering techniques. We reviewed the Triarch SEP's colonial failure rate. 78% of your terraforming attempts fail within a decade. Our success rate is 93%. The official couldn't hide his surprise. How? Your species has barely begun interstellar colonization. Darnell smiled. Because we don't force environments to fit rigid parameters. We adapt both our technology and ourselves. It sets what humans do best. Show them, Riven suggested. Vela touched the data cube again. The display shifted to a barren, hostile-looking planet. This is Nueva Terra, our third colony world, Riven explained. Atmosphere was toxic. Temperature swings were extreme. Soil chemistry incompatible with Earth life. The image changed. Blue oceans, Greenland, vast cities. This is Nueva Terra now, 15 years later. Murmurs spread through the Triarch delegation. Impossible, someone whispered. Atmospheric conversion alone should take a century, using our methods. Which is why we set your offering to share ours, Darnell said. In exchange for fair access to the Orion Arm, and a mutual defense pact. Defense against whom? The counselor asked, though he was starting to suspect the answer. The Seldon aren't acting alone, Riven said darkly. They set proxies for someone else, someone systematically engineering conflicts between rising and established spacefaring powers. Zek-Sep's pivotal decision. Vela changed the display again, showing a strange, unfamiliar vessel. We encountered this near the Arcturus Gateway last year. It claimed to be a Triarch science ship. When we tried standard protocols, it opened fire. When we disabled its engines, it self-destructed. That SEP's not one of ours, said Commander Prowl. Immediately. Configuration SEP's is all wrong. We know, Darnell nodded. We've seen 4 similar false flag attacks in 3 years. Always disguised to look like a rival species. Always trying to provoke conflict. Zek felt a chill settle into his stomachs. You believe someone is intentionally destabilizing this part of the galaxy. We don't just believe it, Riven said grimly. We can prove it. The Seldon messages referenced benefactors, when entities giving them tech beyond Triarch capability in exchange for cooperation in. How did they put it? Ensuring optimal conditions for the Great Harvest, Vela quoted. A heavy silence fell over the room. The Triarch has legends, one of the senior counselors said slowly. Ancient warnings, entities that seeded young species encouraged them to grow, then harvested them at their peak, like crops. Darnell nodded. Earth has similar myths. We dismissed them, until we found evidence of advanced species that simply vanished. No war, no disaster. Just empty cities, abandoned ships. So instead of containing humanity, Sek said, thinking aloud, we should be uniting against this larger threat. That SEP's our proposal. Darnell confirmed. A mutual defense pact first. A formal alliance once the immediate Seldon threat is dealt with. Counselor Marin shook his head violently. This is madness, Commander. You can honestly believe this tale. It's clearly a human ploy to gain ground. Is it? Zek asked softly. Or is it more likely that Admiral Sarenset's been compromised, that she sets serving these harvesters? The room exploded in argument. Triarch officials shouting over each other. Zeki noticed the humans said nothing. They waited, calm amid the storm. Finally, he slammed a limb down on the table. The ancient stone cracked from the impact. Silence. We face 2 possibilities, Zek said evenly. Either the humans are lying to manipulate us, or they Setch telling the truth. And we Setch already been infiltrated. He turned to Darnell. You came knowing you Set be dismissed. Maybe imprisoned. Yet you still brought this. Why? Darnell met his eyes. Because if the roles were reversed, formation of the unlikely alliance, we Steads want the same chance, the same warning. Something in that simple answer resonated with Zek, a decency that transcended species. What would you have me do? He asked. Help us present this to your full council, she replied. Bypass Saren. We need allies who see the real danger. Zek paused. He knew this choice would end his career, no matter what followed. Lieutenant Kor, he said, at last. Secure this chamber. No comms in or out. Sir? Kor looked uncertain. We start drafting a new treaty, one that reflects reality. Not the lies we have been fed, and we start going to present it to the council, with evidence of Saren's betrayal. Marin shot to his feet. This is mutiny. No, Counselor, Zek said calmly. This is loyalty to the Triarch, not its corrupted agents. He turned to Darnell. I want everything you have on the Harvesters. Tech, patterns, weaknesses, all of it. For the first time since arriving, Ambassador Darnell smiled, a warm, genuine smile that softened her alien features into something almost familiar. I was hoping you would say that, she said. Major Revan, full data package, please. Riven stepped forward, handing over a larger storage device. Everything we have, including 2 other species, under similar attacks. Potential allies. For the next 12 hours, the new coalition worked non-stop. They wrote the treaty, compiled proof, and planned how to present it. The more Zek learned about humans, the more his assumptions unraveled. Their adaptability wasn't just biological. It shaped their thoughts, their politics, their very way of being. You know, he said to Darnell during a break, the stories about your species weren't set entirely wrong. You do survive situations that would break most civilizations. Darnell shrugged. We have had practice. Our homeworld tried to kill us for most of our history. Predators, plagues, journey to the Triumvirate Council, natural disasters, predators, disease, you name it. We survived it, Ren said. So when we encountered threats in space, we just adapted like always. The peace talks ended when you stood up, Seovo mused. But something much more important began. Peace talks were never what this was about. Ambassador Ren replied, this was about recognizing what we could be together, rather than fearing what we might do to each other. As the final document was prepared, Seovo felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the grim determination to maintain the status quo that had defined his career, but genuine hope for a better future. The Council wanted us to make this easy, he warned Ren. Even with this evidence, there will be resistance. Major Kale grinned, that predator smile suddenly seeming more companionable than threatening. We stir counting on it. Humans excel at impossible situations. Besides, Myra added, we have already sent copies of everything to our government. If something happens to us, Earth will know why. Zurvo nodded appreciatively. Prudent. As they prepared to board his command shuttle for the journey to the Triumvirate capital, Ren paused beside him. You are taking an enormous risk, Commander. Why? Seovo considered the question carefully, because sometimes duty requires more than following orders. Sometimes it requires recognizing when the path you have been set upon leads to destruction. A very human perspective, she observed. Perhaps, Seovo replied, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence. Your species doesn't set of a monopoly on adaptation after all. As the shuttle's engines ignited, carrying this improbable alliance toward an uncertain reception, Seovo found himself oddly at peace. Whatever came next, whether vindication or disgrace, he knew he was finally serving the true purpose of the Triumvirate, protection through unity, strength through cooperation. And as he watched Ambassador Ren studying the stars through the viewport, her expression both determined and hopeful, Commander Ziovo realized that the galaxy might just be big enough for all of them. If they faced its darkest threats together,